Hello everyone and welcome back to the Artificial DM. Today we are delving into part 2 of Dr. Dungeon's Tale. Part 1 was read by Z Flacco and he told all about how this player was a cheating problem player. Part 2 tells about his experiences with the problem player being a horrible dungeon master. Let's get into the story. So there is a lot to unpack when it comes to problem player's dungeon mastering style. First off, he wasn't very good at it. He would talk about his games a lot between sessions, inevitably spoiling upcoming event. One time, when we were playing a Star Wars game, our Wookiee player said, after the first session, that one day we should go to Kashyyyk to aid in the liberation. Without any prompting, problem player tells the entire group in a public chat that he had planned that for a later session. No spoiler tags, no thought given, just effortlessly smashed any hopes that it would be an exciting and climactic goal to gradually build to on the side. Another thing he did was plan. Excessively. In his notes, he had broken down aforementioned Star Wars game into what he called episodes, and he had this idea where we get through one a session. And while that sounds alright at first, there were a host of reasons why it sucked in-game. First, it meant he was literally never satisfied at the end of a session. If we spent even a split second not following the critical path objectives like a string of set pieces in a not terribly exciting Modern Warfare game, insert one of 50 billion, he would lament how much time we wasted. If we sped through the objectives like a WoW player on the last day of his subscription, he would complain about us not wasting time exploring more. Second, it meant he would constantly rush things to get to some conclusion every session. The first and last thirds of the game would always go by at breakneck pace, as he desperately tried to hurry us along to the end point, which would inevitably result in an ending that we hadn't earned in any way. He was also, quite frankly, unoriginal as crap. Yeah, I know this is a tabletop RPG, and cliché and monomyth are part and parcel of the fantasy fun of it all, but stop me if you've heard this one before. Adventurers have to race to find 3 identical magic objects locked far away from one another that all bear resemblance to art pieces and use them to unlock the way to something vague and unspecific before the bad guys can find them and sell them to the highest bidder and use them themselves. Hauntingly reminiscent of that one animated Tintin movie, as well as basically every adventuring story ever. All his other stories were the same. He would either not tell you the story at all, or it was something with so few original ideas that if you stuck pins in it, all of AAA gaming would get twinges in its back. One time, he literally had a shady guy in a bar pay us 5 million in credits to deliver a strange package to a space station without opening it, no questions asked, and expected the result to come as a shock. Surprise, surprise, it was a bomb. Who possibly could have seen that coming? At that point though, I had resigned myself to my fate, and basically delivered the package and pretended to be surprised when his DMPCs showed up to save the day. He also sucked at roleplay. Every character we met would basically give us a list of what they wanted done, and that was it. No attempt was made to characterize them, no dialogue, nothing. Well, you could talk to them if you wanted, but if you can imagine the ground and the average height of a sheet of blank printer paper, that's the level to which his creativeness in roleplaying these mother floopers stretched. He always replied in one of 3 ways: a monosyllabic noise, a repeat of what they'd already said, or a description of the NPC, ignoring you and walking away. All of them felt the same, and it wasn't helped by the way his complete inability to come up with names on the fly always resulted in them saying their names were not important, or giving us the name of the famous character he was ripping off of at that moment. One time we met a tough-talking, no-nonsense black-haired ISB investigator who went by the name Detective Diaz. I could only facepalm. But his biggest flaw, the one I alluded to in the title, and the one that has continued from his very first campaign to his last, is that he railroads like a mother flooper. It's the worst kind of railroad too, one where he keeps psychotic death grip control of the story, and yet, the plot never moves along at all. The thing is, he gets bored with combat or puzzle solving or any kind of gameplay whatsoever, and so 90% of the campaign is just moving from point A to point B, keeping the story chugging along but never evolving or expanding. Our characters never actually do anything, since all we're doing is following the lines. We escape a pursuing Star Destroyer, but they deploy ties and threaten to kill us unless we come to talk with the officer. So we do, but they just want us to do a smuggling job. We go to the planet, pick up the cargo, and deliver it to the drop zone, suffering no threat or adversity or even slight challenge along the way. We go kill a crime lord, because that's what another crime lord told us to do. But he's already been killed by something else, so when we get there, we just board his damaged ship, look at his corpse, and then go. We go to rob a casino, which he doesn't tell us is run by the First Order, so we walk in, basically walk right up to the main base console, download all their credits, and escape without being pursued by a single guard. We find a planet in distress because these weird satellite things are blocking out the sun, so we board the main satellite. Fight 4 stormtroopers, all of which die in one hit, and mysteriously whiff in all their attacks against us. Blow up station with 1 thermal detonator, end of story. I cannot tell you how utterly devoid of stakes and adversity the game was, because he didn't have the patience to build up anything or introduce any major villains. That brings me to my second point about his DMing. He is a horrible story writer. In addition to treating the big book of cliché like a free ideas bucket, he never reveals anything about the current story to the players. At any point during the current Star Wars campaign, I could stop, turn to the other players, and ask 3 questions that they would not for the life of them be able to answer. Why are we here? How will it help us accomplish our major goals? And what is our major goals in the first place? He didn't have the patience to introduce actual villains for us to fight, so I'm genuinely unsure as to who we're supposed to be facing. And that cliché roundup I described a few paragraphs ago? That was literally the extent of what we have been told about the plot thus far. We literally trip over a secret moon base. It's run by these totally not Ewoks who find this random heavily armed group of wanted criminals on their doorstep and decide that showing them every detail of their secret and incredibly high stakes excavation based on some vague pretense of friendliness is just the tops. They show us these black orbs, explain that if we collect 3 of them, then presumably something will happen, so we go to collect 3 of them. That is literally all we have been told. Did I mention the game has been going on for months now? Presumably, you should have gotten to the part where you make your players give a crap before now. He's one of those DMs who asks for every scrap of information about your characters, but never pays it off in any way. There's no character hooks to get us involved in the story. Our only reason for doing the Tintin thing is on some vague pretenses that whatever happens at the end will involve a load of money. No attempt at characterization is ever worth it because everything always pans out the same way. The way he planned for it to. I'm playing a handsome smuggler, a charmer and smooth talker, who had a tendency to flip out and go completely banana flute buckets mental with very little warning. He had a death wish and a flair for the dramatic. He would do things like threaten to shoot himself during negotiations, or arm a series of seismic charges in the cargo hold of his ship, purely to inform his captive audience who was calling the shots. I wanted to play him like this complete wild card, integral to the party's success, but completely unpredictable, and you were never sure what motivated his actions. Kind of a Riddick sort of deal. He'd do something nice, and you might think he does actually care about you. But throughout it all, there was this definite sense that he could blow the entire room to cinders and not give 2 craps about it. But none of this mattered anyway, because every dialogue went the same, whether he was calmly negotiating over tea or standing on the table with a thermal detonator in one hand and a gun pointed at his own head in the other. The NPC told us what they wanted. We did it. Over and over and over again. One last thing before I go. Anyone who suggests I just talk to him about all this might as well save themselves the time. I have. I am by nature a very confrontational person, and I have a bad habit of pointing out my every irritation with something, even if it doesn't annoy me that much. He just doesn't get it. I don't even think he enjoys the game that much, but he just doesn't understand what's wrong, and I can't get him to. It doesn't help that everyone else in the group is very non-confrontational, and they don't enjoy getting involved in my lengthy criticisms. Anyway, that's my story about PP's troubles behind the screen. Not just a problem player as it turns out, but also a disinteresting dungeon master. In this situation, I feel like OP should just go ahead and quit the group. He does say in the comments that it's his only group around and therefore he wants to keep playing, but honestly he would be much better off making his own group. The fact that Problem Player not only has DMPCs, has a straightforward narrative, and doesn't even seem interested in his own games, it shows that they're just gonna keep doing this over and over and over again. Yeah, OP did talk with the DM, but the fact that the DM doesn't even see what's wrong, it probably shows that the DM thinks this is how D&D or Star Wars RPG or whatever is supposed to be played. And sure, you're supposed to have a goal and a narrative, and sometimes the DM has to slap one in front of the players, but that doesn't mean that is the only way to play the game. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you didn't listen to part 1 read by Z Flacco, although I'm not sure why you would have done it that way, and if you want to hear more of our collaborative projects, including ones with RPG Tales, you can click some of the playlists at the end of the video. That's gonna do it for today. And until next time, hope you feel inspired.